Welcome to the Purdue Dairy Digest. I'm Dr. Jackie Borman. Today we will talk about the history of the World Dairy Expo and specifically how the theme for this year's expo is an indication of where the dairy industry is going in the future. For those of you who have attended the World Dairy Expo in Madison, Wisconsin, it can feel overwhelming that there is so much dairy concentrated into one place. For those who have not yet attended, the World Dairy Expo is the largest dairy-focused trade show in the world, coupled with an excellent dairy show and dairy judging competitions. I attended my first World Dairy Expo in 2002 and was in awe of the animals walking the colored shavings and the number of people who are involved in the dairy industry who attend. Today, I wanted to share a little bit about the origins of the World Dairy Expo and specifically what the expo is focused on this year. In 1910, the Iowa State Dairy Association started the Dairy Cattle Congress, which was likely the closest predecessor to the World Dairy Expo. The show in Iowa was huge, with companies like Maytag and Procter & Gamble bringing in their show cattle for the competition. Companies having herds of show cattle is a little hard to think of now, but I'm sure that there are some firms out there that would be open to an Apple or a Google investing in their dairy herds. Showing cows during the first half of the 1900s was the golden era of purebred dairy cattle, and people flocked to Waterloo, Iowa to see these superior cattle. The Dairy Cattle Congress consisted of 85,000 square feet of exhibitor space, which is just a little bit smaller than today's World Dairy Expo, and at its peak, over 100,000 people attended. Railroad cars transported cattle across the country to Iowa after these cows competed in local and state shows. In the 1960s, the Dairy Cattle Congress began to focus on events for other species, and several dairy farmers from Wisconsin became concerned that the focus of the Dairy Cattle Congress was now much broader than dairy cattle and no longer served the need that they felt existed. In 1967, these Wisconsin dairymen started what is now known as the World Dairy Expo, held in Madison, Wisconsin. The mission of the expo is to serve as a forum for dairy producers, companies, organizations, and other dairy enthusiasts to come together to compete and to exchange ideas, knowledge, technology, and commerce. This year at the World Dairy Expo, there will be about 65,000 attendees from 100 countries, and 2,300 cattle will be exhibited. Perhaps because of the lessons learned from the Dairy Cattle Congress in Waterloo, the focus of the expo has always been on the dairy cow and the dairy farmer. It is hard to imagine the changes in dairy farming that have occurred since that first dairy show in Waterloo, Iowa in 1910. This year especially is a contrast to 1910, as the focus of the expo is tools for dairy progress, with an emphasis of those tools being ways that we can utilize data that is generated from a cow in order to improve decision-making on farm. The expo specifically is highlighting apps on your phone that can improve dairy farming. Because of the considerable amount of information that dairy calves and cows produce, companies and researchers both are trying to make sense of the data to help make better decisions on a farm. Again, much has changed since 1967 when Expo started, and in another 50 years, I'm sure we will look back at 2019 as a simpler and less sophisticated way to dairy farm. I believe we are just at the cusp of understanding our capabilities to utilize technology to improve dairy farming, and I'm excited to be part of this industry now. If you are a subscriber to the podcast, can you do us a favor and rate us in iTunes? If you're not a subscriber, become one today, and you can listen to this podcast at your own time. Thank you.